Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Um, in case we haven't met before, I'm Becca Pat. I'm the library director at the college, and I'll let my co-host introduce herself too.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Deirdre Young. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as Assistant Dean for Institutional Equity and Inclusion, as well as Chief Diversity Officer at the College for Creative Studies. Thank you so much for joining us.
So tonight's lecture will be the kickoff for the DEI lecture series. So we're really excited to be able to co-host between the libraries and the Office of Institutional Equity and Inclusion. So I will get us started by introducing our speakers before I turn it over to them. So the Black Lunch Table is an ongoing collaborative project founded by artists Gina Valentine and Heather Hart. The project was first staged in 2005 at Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. The BLT has since taken the form of oral archiving sessions, salons, peer teaching workshops, meetups, and Wikipedia edit-a-thons. Several prestigious institutions, including Storm King Art Center in New York, have hosted BLT, and the project has received recognition and support from a variety of institutions, including the Warhol Foundation and the Wikimedia Foundation. Heather Hart is based in Brooklyn, New York. She studied at Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle, Princeton University in New Jersey, and received her MFA from Rutgers University. She is interested in creating site-specific liminal spaces for personal reclamation in questioning dominant narratives and proposing alternatives to them. Her work has been exhibited worldwide, and she has received numerous grants and artist residencies. Our second speaker is Gina Valentine, and she's based in Chicago, where she's an associate professor of print media at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. She received her BFA from Carnegie Mellon University and her MFA from Stanford University. Her independent practice reconciles the spaces between data visualized and experience lived to foster, nuanced and alternative understandings of socio-political phenomena, and to inspire compassionate associations with communities and individuals affected by or generative of these phenomena. Gina has exhibited throughout the US and received a variety of foundations, and she has also participated in artist residencies both nationally and abroad. So these are very accomplished speakers, and please join me, in welcoming Heather and Gina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Becca, Shay, Deirdre, for inviting us to share our work with you today. We also hope that we'll be able to connect at some point in person. And we want to say sincere thanks to the whole College for Creative Studies for fiscal and logistical support for this engagement. And we'd like to thank the Warhol Foundation, the Wikimedia Foundation, and Creative Capital for their ongoing support of Black Lunch Table.
So hi. I don't want to repeat too much of what Becca said, but maybe we can just kind of talk about where we come from in the project a little bit. So I'm Heather Hart. I was born in Seattle and I now live in Brooklyn. My sculptural forms are an exploration of liminal space. I'm interested in the enigmatic nature of forms that exist simultaneously inside and outside, underground and visible, private and public, between safety and chance, minimalism and handmade, between the spiritual and the natural. In these in-between spaces, they reflect the complicated nature of understanding the self and each other. Most Black Americans descended from people who had no physical space of their own when they landed on this continent. We kept an oral tradition of storytelling alive to maintain our culture, claiming a non-physical space of our own. This oral tradition, a liminal space, seeds my work. The content of my sculptures may transform depending on who experiences them and their perception, which is what happens to legends as they're handed down in their oral traditions. I want to encourage visitors to relate with my work through their own physical interaction. I make environments that direct viewers to become participants. I believe people listen better when they are included in the process of discovery.
Hi, I'm Gina Valentine, and this is my little dude. He's not that little anymore. You'll probably see him at some point during this talk. I'm from Philadelphia, but I live in Chicago, where I'm an artist, writer, professor, and mother. I guess I start with the slide because the maternal desire to cultivate the best of all possible worlds for my son spills over into my studio practice. My recent work was inspired of my inability to empathize with mothers who'd lost their children to state violence. I can't imagine losing my own son, nor can I conjure the language to explain these deaths to him. So reaching the limit of what is comprehensible, the words in those newspaper accounts become pure form. And all my new inquiries are catalyzed by my meditation on a subjective experience or a common sentiment. And so my project's origins are generally pretty personal, but they're tied to popular narratives. Much of my practice, as was said in the intro, relates to reconciling the difference between data illustrations and the realities that they reference. I try to foster a nuanced and alternative understanding of socio-political phenomena in order to inspire some compassion for those people and communities, situations that the data intends to represent. My projects employ the use of data aggregation, visualization software, research in physical and digital archives, material experimentation, and collaboration with programmers and humanities researchers.
So our individual practices intersect in a number of mutual interests: storytelling, the production and promotion of legacies, and conducting social experiments. We met in 2005 at Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, where we collaborated on the first staging of the Black Lunch Table. Next slide, Gina. We began the project as tricksters, wondering what would happen if we segregated a purportedly idyllic space so it mimicked spaces we had experienced in our lives in real life. We thought about perception and self-identification, claiming the space reified our presence in the community as we exposed the problematics around who has a seat at the table. We mulled over ideas of civic responsibility, auto-segregation, and cultural gatekeepers. The event catalyzed waves of conversation with our excluded white friends around its apparent subversion and disruption, teasing out issues related to privileges they lived with daily.
That first convening echoes in each of our lives, and the project evolved into a number of forms, including video chats with 5 different colleges when we each found ourselves one of very few Black grad students in our respective programs. We also went on to host co-teaching workshops, social meetups, roundtables, and Wikipedia editathons. So the Black Lunch Table's primary aim is the production of discursive sites wherein cultural producers engage in dialogue around a variety of critical issues. Through these events, we seek to mobilize a democratic rewriting of contemporary cultural history by animating discourse around and among those people living that history. Authoring the dominant historical narrative means determining who is other and the terms by which they are treated as such. Black Lunch Table is a critical gesture to disrupt that narrative.
The significance of Black lunch tables and lunchrooms is specific to those who choose to participate in its formation and to those whom it necessarily excludes. Their existence in otherwise public spaces marks a self-segregation residual of our country's history of sanctioned segregation. Organized around literal and metaphorical lunch tables, the project takes this phenomena as its starting point. Whether or not you've sat at a Black lunch table, its formation is universally recognized. And so the space we name the Black lunch table is immediately bound up with those associations. Our project consists of roundtable sessions, Wikipedia editathons, and an online oral history archive.
Our roundtable sessions provide both physical space and allotted time for interdisciplinary and intergenerational discussions, bringing together a diversity of community members and fostering candid conversation. Participants are provided with conversation prompts, and the audio recorded at each table will be added to our online archive. At the artist table, which is our founding initiative, we curate cultural producers of the African diaspora into roundtable discussions. Providing space to discuss critical issues strengthens the bonds within our nebulous community and validates shared concerns through exchange.
Our event formats are based around storytelling, and participants engage in critical conversation relevant to the discussion of art by Black artists. By generating a dialogue among Black artists in partnership with institutions of record, we are highlighting contingencies in the art world already at play. By involving institutions, artists, art historians, curators, collectors in this dialogue, we are creating a piece in which all these actors have both a say and something at stake. Writing the record has become everyone's charge. This is a segment of audio from our 2015 Artist Roundtable at the Black Artist Retreat in Chicago.
But in terms of that question, I think it depends on the curatorial imperative. I don't think there is such a thing as the Black show that's right or wrong. You know, your Black is Black ain't with one kind. I mean,
Right,
it depends
Which
on
wasn't
the
a Black show,
curatorial
though.
imperative.
It was
for me,
a
but the
diverse show.
curatorial intention is.
And the problem with that is it tends to get reductive, and then it can advance a narrative that already exists, and then it's easy for someone to criticize it in those reductive terms.
Right.
And I think this isn't a monolithic culture. It's a vibrant, polymorphic culture, pluralistic culture. And so, as Daoud was saying, depending on the curatorial premise, if it emphasizes that polymorphous, this many-sided, many forms aspect of art practices, then I'm okay, because now it's challenging the existing narrative.
Well, and I think
How
the
does
thing,
that relate to the Studio Museum?
Right.
as you guys on the spot.
But right, no.
Representative.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
It's
no,
built
it's
in the mission. It's
Yeah.
no. We have several artists that have said no, they don't want to show at the Studio Museum. I mean, they say I don't want my work to be contextualized in that way.
Right? But right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's every month is Black
But
History
beyond
Month.
whether or not they want to participate or not, sort of the deeper sort of idea around the construction of these kinds of exhibitions from your vantage points as curators and art historians.
I think
mean,
it's
is that a
kind
valid
of,
question?
it is, and I honestly sometimes, most days think it's kind of not easier in a way, but it's a freedom in a way that we have at the Studio Museum, where as at many other institutions, if you have a show that has an amount of Black artists in it, many institutions are still saying this Black artist, this artist, and basing everything in it and how it relates to race, identity, culture. And I think what we are allowed to do, because that's a given. There's, in the various realms and the stretches of the word Black and what it means, those are the artists we're working with. But then, great, everyone knows that, so then we can actually get into this deeper conversation. And this idea is around other ways that people are working and the topics and how it's. So I think of it, it's a freedom in a way that loosens those.
So the Black Lunch Table, People's Table Sessions was conceived of in 2014 in response to the deaths of Mike Brown and Eric Garner, among so many other unarmed Black people, as well as the non-conviction of their police assailants. The series began as a collaboration with artist and UNC professor Hong An Chung. The People's Table is a community roundtable session and is open to everyone. These discussions convene artists, activists, academics, high school and university students, politicians, and other local community members who represent various constituencies within communities. This series hopes to make visible divisions and connections that exist within our communities, while also activating new productive relationships to continue the movement to dismantle institutional racism. The discussion prompts provided intend to catalyze dialogue around local, national, and international socio-political issues affecting historically disenfranchised populations. These sessions allow for candid conversations to take place amongst a diversity of people invested in these issues.
As with the Artist Roundtable, we record these conversations and for our online, we record these conversations for our online oral history archive. We see this as an act of radical archiving, as we, the people, are writing the record. Here's an audio sample from one of those sessions.
PowerPoint. Sorry, guys. We will come back to that. Do you want to just hold on for a sec? I can hop out and play it from here.
We do. Here is an audio sample
Can you
from
hear
one
it?
of those sessions.
Can you guys hear that? No.
No. It's fine. We can link back at the end.
Okay.
But slide 27.
Oh my goodness gracious. All right, slide 27.
Our website will ultimately house all Black Lunch Table related content, aggregating our online projects. The oral history archive we are building was begun at UNC Chapel Hill in collaboration with folks at their Digital Innovations Lab and Institute for Arts and Humanities. This work continues with a small team of researchers and developers. Currently, the beta version of the Black Lunch Table houses a small set of records, recorded, transcribed, and metadata tagged, dialogues from a dozen or so BLT roundtable events. We are working with programmers to develop an archive that that can be sourced via relational metadata, and are discussing integrating the archive and the discussion prompts used in our roundtable into the classroom setting. The database is searchable by a variety of terms, including participant, institution, location, date, discussion, topics. This is a visualization of how the various metadata tagged topics from roundtable discussions map to each other. We've been discussing the possibilities of integrating linked open data into our archive with our team member and digital humanities researcher, Ryan Horn. Ryan recently noted the following about the project and its significance. The BLT archive is a unique and innovative fusion of linked open data, LOD principles, linked network-based interface and analysis, and user-generated content and curation. As with its creation of physical spaces that foster community and generate critical dialogue, the archive provides a digital space for a community-driven approach to art, historical authorship, and discourse on Black studies and social justice issues.
So we wish, and this is continuing With Ryan, we wish to create, in essence, a browsable network of linked concepts that show the relation not only to individual artists and projects, but to a broader discourse unfolding within online spaces. Through using community-created tags and relationships, we make it possible to use social network analysis, software, and methodologies to explore how the different topics found in the BLT archive relate to one another, and to express those relationships through our archive's user interface. So instead of a simple search box, which leads to a collection of results like a traditional audio archive, users can type in a topic of interest and actually see the amount of time it is present in each discussion and other topics which are closely associated with it. So like you see here, a sample of audio wherein the topic artists came up. Because there's only a dozen sets here, there will probably be a lot more connecting nodes when we have the full sample set up. Next. Combined with user-generated tags, the archive facilitates both the curated and organic development of authorship and content interpretation, which conforms to accepted LOD principles. This allows our archive to automatically share, retrieve, and present data to other projects and archive systems to further enhance and democratize the creation of digital spaces and records. Building upon this foundation, we envision the creation of a digital ecosystem where artists and digital projects can freely share and connect works and data in whatever form they take, with topics which are of interest to the larger community surrounding social justice, race, and art. Okay, our team member, Tamanda Msosa, is currently developing the prototype for our audio transcript playback tool. It'll look something like this when it's completed. Basically, an archive visitor will be able to listen to the audio and simultaneously read the transcript and search within that transcript for words and phrases to queue up within the audio.
Finally, Wikipedia. Block Lunch Table project is inspired by questions related to authorship. Who writes the record? What is omitted from the record? Authoring the dominant historical narrative means determining who is other and the terms by which they are treated as such. Our work is a critical gesture to disrupt that narrative. Slide, yeah. As we researched models for the BLT archive to house the recorded audio, we noted that many significant Black artists were omitted from the art historical archives and the world's most widely referenced encyclopedia, Wikipedia. Our Wikipedia project redresses these omissions by mobilizing a collective authoring of articles on the lives and works of Black artists. While Wikipedia is an open source platform wherein anyone has equal voice in writing and editing historical records, recent studies show that about 91% of editors are male and 77% are white. And this is why we wiki. We are actively cultivating a more diverse editorship, in addition to encouraging editors in the majority demographic to focus on the marginalized or omitted subject matter.
Our editathons mobilize the creation and improvement of Wikipedia articles that pertain to the lives and works of notable Black visual artists. At each editathon, we provide a list of suggested artists to add or edit with particular focus on Black artists who have worked within or local to the host institution's community and who are currently underdocumented on Wikipedia. These artists are added to our ever-growing list of focused articles or tasks, which is now over 1,300 artists long. And And organizing editathons mobilizes a collective authoring of a specific set of articles. It ultimately empowers people with the awareness that no history is static. See how joyful that realization is. In the past year, our Wiki Commons photo initiative has become a highlight of our work, as it is an opportunity for everyone to contribute in a small but incredibly impactful way. The primary objective of the photo initiative is quite literally to increase the visibility of Black artists on Wikimedia. The process is simple. We invite a local Black photographer to host a pop-up portrait booth at our editathon. We invite local artists from our focus list to have their photo taken, and the photographer releases portraits to Wiki Commons for use on those artists' articles.
DLT has always sought to provide a space for communion, affirmation, and discourse, and has been the reason for our roundtable series. We recognize the extraordinary need for community spaces and see value in conversation as a space for catharsis and movement of communication and resource. Over the past year, our online event series has provided such retreats and inspiration. We have hosted artist talks, performances, screenings, DJ sets, yoga workshops on Instagram, regular Wikipedia workshops, and editathons online, and have connected through so many channels through this work. And we are ever grateful for the dedication and inspiration we find in our team.
And we are ever grateful for the ongoing support from our institutional and individual donors. You can always see what we have coming up by visiting our website or checking out our meetup page on Wikipedia. Here is a short list of things that are coming up in the next month and change. No need to memorize it. You can visit our Wikipedia meetup page to check things out. And you can always message us at info@blacklunchtable.com. And we'd like to end on this note because it is a positive one. I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gina and Heather. That was very enlightening. That was really, really interesting. And I appreciate you also sharing the Wikipedia link in the chat as well. And the website for your group is in there as well. So a couple of questions. So how do you hear about and how do you decide? Oh, I apologize. Someone has their hand raised. Let me take a look here. Apologies for that. So it looks like Nadine has her hand raised. And Nadine, I've given you permission to unmute if you'd like.
I actually did not mean to do that. I am so sorry. I'm listening with the phone up to my ear, but this is a great presentation. I'm so glad to hear you both today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nadine. Sorry about that. Yes, so sorry, what I was going to say was, how do you hear about the artists and how do you decide which ones to raise up?
It's completely open. So with the roundtable discussions, we normally work with an institution that will host the event, and we send out an open call for self-identifying. So anybody can sign up and come lend their voice. We feel like the participants are the generous ones in this situation. And then the curation that we do is really just arranging the tables. So we try to make sure that folks that know each other don't really sit together. We have a diversity of age groups and mediums, backgrounds, locations, etc., at each table. And then with Wikipedia, Wikipedia has specific guidelines around their notability, which we have for the most part followed, but we also try to challenge those guidelines sometimes because, as we know, Wikipedia was meant as an alternative to mainstream media to document the sum of all human knowledge. But when notability rules mimic those systematic biases that exist in the media, then we end up missing out on the same folks. So we have some creative ways around pushing the boundaries for that. One of which is anyone can add a name to that ever-growing list of targets on our Wikipedia list. And it's a matter of every individual who participates to evaluate if they can stick as an article on Wiki.
I actually was looking through your list of people that you want to add to Wikipedia, and it is massive, absolutely massive. That's amazing. Okay, so we do have a question, and this is from Vince Carducci, and he says, in looking at the Wikipedia entries for a couple of Detroit artists, I noticed that they are pretty well done with consistent formatting. Do you provide training?
Yeah, we do. So, an editathon is generally a short intro to our project, but also an introduction to becoming a member of the Wikipedia community, right? So Wikimedia community. So there are, I would say that part of onboarding folks, part of introducing folks to Wiki is a lot of demystification. So there are a lot of rules and regulations, but there is also a community of humans on the other side of each of those IP addresses and each of those usernames, right? And I think also, I don't know, reassuring people that they know what they're interested in and can actually do the research they are interested in doing in order to improve and update articles, right? I think that's the most fun thing to do. Everybody finds like that they have a particular thing that they're really interested in doing. I really like grammar and punctuation, just like little things. But there are people who are really keen to dive into research deeply, or people who are really interested in adding citations. Or if you're a photographer and you're interested in contributing to Wiki Commons, to photographs that exist in that archive, you can also do that. I don't know if I answered that person's question.
Yeah, I think it's just like our editathons include about a half an hour or maybe 45 minutes of just walking you through all of the guidelines and formatting. And it feels overwhelming when you hear it like that, but our whole project is meant to be really one-on-one attention for that kind of training and giving you tools to go back to if you forget everything that we teach you. So that Wikipedia meetup page that I put in the chat also has like self-guided tutorials and videos that you could poke around in if you didn't go to an editathon. But the more that you edit, the more you'll realize it's really an in-person community. I mean, not to be virtual, real people as well, but I'm just saying it really is, you benefit by knowing folks who can help you answer questions along the way, including figuring out the rules, but also being bold, in case you mess up, it doesn't matter, we can fix it.
Great, thank you so much. Valerie Jenkins had a question that has to do with students being involved in your work. So she says, thank you for the presentation, all the work you're doing. Have you been able to interface this project within the educational institutions that you teach or involve students in any way?
I mean, I'll start that just because right before this talk, I just got out of class. So I am working with an art history professor at a university that I teach at. So I'm in the art department. Art history is a different school. And so I'm working with her students. They're doing research on specifically artists that are in the collection of the university's museum or gallery. And so we just did about 2 hours of onboarding editathon style training about Wiki. And then she, there's different tools that we also show folks, especially in education, to, if they didn't want to do just one discrete editathon, there's a way and some tools that you can use over time to assign your students different articles and kind of track their progress and editing. Everything on Wiki is public domain, including all the privacy, like all of the inboxes and messaging are open, so I can go and like see who has written Gina today. And so that's really useful for a classroom setting. I don't know, Gina, did you want to talk about Alexandria's lecture?
Oh yeah, I was also just thinking about all the varieties of like contexts that you can teach with Wiki and that you can find into Wiki as a student. I think it's been really fun to connect with librarians. You guys are always really excited to work with Wiki. So I'm at the Art Institute in Chicago, and they've hosted a number of art and feminism editathons. We did an editathon with them. We did an editathon with Columbia College too, which was based on like physical archives that they had there that they had kind of collected from around the city. So like thinking about working with different source materials and to work, specific curricula. This past winter, I taught a class that was related to, I guess, digital humanities for like visual artists, right? And those guys were super excited to connect like that course content with Wiki editing. And we did start off with our task list, but like I said, everybody was really keen to find their own thing within, what was presented. So
we've also worked with like photo classes. So, something
right.
that's less linear, so like each student has an assignment to reach out to an artist via email or their website or something to see if they can take their portrait for Wiki. There's countless ways to intersect Wiki, and that's one thing that we love creatively thinking with instructors about. We had we worked last week, I think, or this weekend.
Oh yeah,
we
Sunday.
had a workshop about Wiki EDU, which is a like a framework, a system to help educators integrate Wiki to the classroom.
Yeah, I can shout out her book chapter too. It's really great. Oh, I finally put my books away off my desk. I don't have it here anymore, but in the Wiki at 20 book, there's a really brilliant article about why do I have the authority to edit the page. And the chapter is by Dr. Alexandria Lockett, who's at Spelman. And she's talking about not only teaching, the nuts and bolts of how to edit, but also thinking about how to integrate Wiki in the classroom into, lessons on, writing a research paper and doing research in libraries with physical documents, right? But then also how to empower is overused, and for the lack of a better word, how to encourage students to, take agency to write, a publicly available document, right? Which I think is really important too.
Thank you both. I just wanted to jump in really quick with a question that I had for the two of you. So I think you started to talk about this a little bit in terms of Wikipedia, but I'm wondering if you could maybe talk more broadly about how research relates to your artistic practice, and maybe in terms of like also data too, because I know there are some people on the call that work either in their own practices or with students with data in different ways. And for me, that really comes up with the oral history archive project. So if you could talk a little bit more about that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gina's probably more direct, but I'll answer the little bit where I overlap in those terms. I think I consider myself really a research-based public artist. So I look, whenever I get a large commission or whenever I'm starting a new project, I normally start with looking for an overlap between the concepts that I'm interested in and the site. So that can be contemporary or historical relevance. And I'm looking often at oral histories, at architectures, at spaces of Blackness, thresholds, etc. Right now, I'm collecting quotes, I guess I'll call architectural quotes of spaces that are kind of like thresholds or fragments of architecture that hold some sort of Black history or culture in some way. And so I've expanded that research to include oral history. So I feel like that is a way that I am going to be directly using our archive along with other kinds of conversations I have in like an oral narrative way. But Gina has more direct work with that.
I was looking for a way to segue that into playing the audio that we missed from the People's Table. I am currently working on, actually, sorry, I'm also trying to think of a direct answer to your question. The class that I taught over the winter session, which was called Inundata, Humanizing Data Viz, kind of sought to create some conversations around how to reinfuse data visualizations with some semblance of humanity, right? So we look at a data visualization, there's always a disconnect between those images and the situations or phenomena or the circumstances they intend to illustrate, right? And so I think that, as artists, we're in a good position to try to, put some, sorry, I don't know why words are so hard today, but try to flesh these out and to make them more aligned with the lived experience. And that's kind of what I try to do in my work. I'm currently working on a project wherein I'm looking at all 67 of W.E.B. Du Bois's data visualizations that were collaboratively created for the 1900 Paris exposition, and updating all of them with contemporary data from the census. The idea is to redraw all of those data visualizations with contemporary data, just as they were originally drawn, to show what things have remained the same, what things have changed. And in one of the slides that I first showed, that was from sort of the 35 most severely gerrymandered districts in the country. I'm kind of interested in who recognizes that those are congressional districts and who just appreciates them as these kind of cool ink blots. But also just thinking about how yeah, I guess the disconnect that exists, the degree to which gerrymandering actually affects people who live in districts that have been, historically disenfranchised versus the way that they're represented on a map, right? So the people that are redrawing districts are looking at these crazy looking shapes, and the people living there know that they are actually disenfranchised. So that's my interest, I guess. I did not actually find a decent segue into playing the People's Table audio. I don't know if it would make sense to play it still, or if we have other questions.
Deirdre, did you have a specific question? Otherwise, Gina, we can go to the audio that you have. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Let's see if I can get it to play this time. Actually,
for me, the real basic thing we're trying to figure out is like how we all live safe and free and viable communities. Like that's for me a real basic thing. Like I want to be safe. I want to be free. I want to have a vital life. I want that for my children. And so all these different ways that kind of plays itself out with either this face-to-face encounter with someone who means to do me harm.
Right.
There's this question of safety. There's this question of accountability. There's this question of over-policing, this question of community governance and us being able to create alternative structures that then don't end up shooting and or arresting people who don't need to be arrested. You know?
I think it's a great idea, but it really depends on the community. If you're existing in a space that you feel threatened by those who live there, or segments of the population that live there, it's a very difficult situation. Yeah, and while I can appreciate unarmed mediation, it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't necessarily mean nonviolent. It just means that you aren't armed.
What do you understand unarmed mediation to be?
I'm imagining the ability to go in and try to resolve issues before they become problematic. But I think in most communities, though, many problems already exist. So how do we tackle those problems where they are first? And how do we approach people where they are rather than where we want them to be?
When I think about the possibilities of unarmed mediation, I actually am thinking about community governance and our ability to kind of govern ourselves and take care of each other and hold each other accountable. It's over-policing around nonsense. Like a kid in my neighborhood with a little bit of weed getting slammed on the ground for what, he's 16.
Right.
He's splitting. What is that going to help? Depending on how it's criminalized, your ability to be civically engaged in this state, to get a job, to get housing,
get certain kind of licenses.
Exactly. It's tethered to that. And what happens to a kid who somehow haphazardly gets caught up in the system before they even are of age to vote by some criminalized, not minuscule thing? They get pushed out of their ability to be fully engaged.
I think the issue here is not whether someone is subject to arrest or whatever, it's whether the offense is criminalized. That's different.
Right. Yeah.
So if I'm jaywalking and I get arrested 20 times, and I just get arrested 20 times for jaywalking, I'm not criminalized, if you will. But once you criminalize an offense, it means that you're subject to all these kinds of penalties because having less than an ounce of marijuana is criminalized. Trespassing, for example, on Main Street may not be the same as trespassing over here in North Durham. So it's been criminalized, so that's the issue. So that means that there's a second element, which you're talking about, that if you have a person who becomes a nuisance, which is what generally you hear. You don't hear that's a criminal. You know, they're committing these criminal offenses. They're doing these nuisance things that piss the police off. That you're not supposed to be within 100 feet of this place and you're within 100 feet. So what happens? You see this with all folks on the street who are without homes that are arrested for vagrancy. And then they arrest them and they move them to another place. That's the difference. So criminalization, once something is criminalized, it means that it raises the level of sanction. So that's what I'm seeing as the intent of this, that there are alternatives to criminalizing something. If it means that we're going to release you into the custody of your parents, and your parents are going to be responsible. If this happens again, you're going to have to go through this level of counseling. You're not to be in the company of these particular people anymore. So what I'm saying is that you address the issue directly.
So I think you're right. I think there's a way that we navigate all of these interactions in a way where people can come out safe and whole.
I could listen to these all day, I think, and I don't think that's just me.
Yeah, a lot of topics. Thank you. We did have a question come in relating to the gerrymandering that you were referencing, Gina. So can you expand a bit on the gerrymandering data visualizations? How were they created? And what process or tools are you using? And this is from one of our communication design faculty who says that he absolutely loves.
Oh yeah, maybe I should be asking them for some advice. I find them, GitHub has like a whole stash of them. I think that's where I'd originally gotten them. And then also like state websites and like digging through archives in university basements. Some of them came from there. I kind of cleaned up and compiled everything with ArcGIS. And I think that's it. But yeah, a lot of the research I did on gerrymandering doesn't actually find its way into that work. Like the Princeton gerrymandering project is amazing. What's going on with Michigan's community redistricting project is also really amazing. There's like I think a 13-person jury. They're just regular people who were selected to contribute to redrawing the districts in that state, which is so wonderful. I used to live in North Carolina, and I think 6 of the most heavily gerrymandered districts are in North Carolina. And so like while I was there, they were working on redrawing these things. I think maybe, okay, here's the segue to the People's Table. So the topic that they were discussing there, so these are some folks who were in North Carolina and Durham. There are 2 professors from UNC, one who's in the art department, one who's in the African American Studies department, a person who is very involved in Black, brown, queer organizing in Durham, and some folks who were clergy. And so the conversation was kind of bringing together all of these these constituents from the same like physical community that are having conversations, around the same topics, but in very different ways, which I think was the impetus for that table. But, they're talking about how like being in a neighborhood, like one part of a neighborhood is a very different experience of like policing. And, that your geography, where you end up, right, in these, well, in the world, but in Durham in particular, it has a real impact on your life, right? Like what school you go to, how the cops treat you. Yeah. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And I think Deirdre was going to wrap it up for us. Are you there, Deirdre?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Heather and Gina. This was fantastic. You kind of hit home when you were talking about gerrymandering. I almost came off the screen and then I came back out of the screen. I have so many things to say about that, but I won't. I just really want to thank you for sharing your time, space, and passion with my colleagues here at CCS, as well as our community members that are participating. We really appreciate you taking the time and the work that you're doing. Will speak volumes, it continues to speak volumes, and create memories and actually oral history, sharing it, Wikipedia-thons, everything that we learned about. This is very exciting, and I just thank you for your time. Also, I wanted to invite all of our community members to our upcoming events and our lecture series while I have everyone's attention. Our next one is going to be Monday, April 5th. It's in partnership with WIU, CCS, is Printmaking and the Politics of Protest, a conversation with Shepard Furry, So I encourage you. Our very own Professor Tiana Bowie will be moderating that event. The next one will be our anti-ableism workshop, which will be April 11th, which is a Tuesday, and that is going to be sponsored by the Detroit Disability Power. Our following one is the power of image, how inclusion intersects with illustration. My office, in partnership with our illustration department, Don Kilpatrick as the lead, will be bringing a conversation that will revolve around experience in navigating communication in regards to social context and illustration, how cultural perspectives influence picture making, and more. And finally, if you didn't think that was enough, on Monday, April 26th, Taiwan is going to present information for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Taiwan Chang is an investigative news journalist in New York City, and he spent 6 to 7 years as an ad reporter in Detroit in the 80s. He's a Peabody Award winner and has worked with major news outlets throughout his career. So I encourage you to stay tuned for the month of April, because we have a lot coming your way, CCS. Thank you, everyone, for your attention tonight. Be safe out there. If you have any feedback, questions, or concerns, feel free to email me at diversity@collegeforcreativestudies.edu. Thank you, and have a great night.